Hello everybody, today we're going to be talking about role-playing games, video games in general, and the customization options these games have, and what significance that holds for the player. You see, in earlier games, you were only able to customize maybe one or two things about your character, like your hair color or your face. That's pretty much it. And otherwise, everyone had exactly the same body types, the same size. Every single thing about the characters was the same, and you were at the mercy of whatever gear you had at the time. Such as, well, the Elder Scrolls. We can go back and look at Arena and Daggerfall, where you got to choose from a few pre-rendered faces. We look in Morrowind, same deal. The customization options really weren't there. Only around Oblivion's time did we start getting customization options, and oh my god, look at that.
Let me see your face.
Yeah, that's a thing. Now, they ended up limiting the range of options which you were able to use in Skyrim, thank goodness, to a slightly more human appearance. But even in Fallout 4's more advanced system, look at what you're able to create. Holy crap. Ultimately, customization is at the core of what people are looking for in games, at least in open world games, where you create your own character. And unfortunately, for games with really strong narratives, ones where they want you to be this particular person, like Geralt for instance, customization really doesn't mean a lot. And it shouldn't mean a lot, because you're taking on the role of this particular person, not creating a character that you want to represent yourself in a virtual world. Now, what made me come up with this topic in the first place? Well, my wife and I recently got back into World of Warcraft. It's a big thing for us because we've been playing WoW for years. I've been playing it since it first came out, hell, even before that in the beta, and my wife has been playing it a little bit before Burning Crusade came out, I would say. But either way, we ended up creating brand new characters on the Wormrest Accord United States server. Looked like the Scarlet Crusade people. How was this possible? Because there's this brand new feature called the Wardrobe that was added. Any items that are on your account, you're able to take on that appearance. So because my wife and I have a linked account, I had the benediction staff on my priest from the old days of raiding Molten Core. Well, she was able to take that appearance through the wardrobe function and transmogrify her staff with it. It's kind of like the way Diablo 3 works, except because the way World of Warcraft is, it's not this top-down, you see it from a distance. Your characters actually have pretty much substance in the world. So your character's appearance, its customization, is a hell of a lot more important. At least that's how it feels, because it's more of an expression of you. So we created a Scarlet Crusade themed guild, and we created Scarlet Crusade outfits for ourselves. The question I'm asking today is, do they have to follow a specific theme? Do they have to be in character to the game you're playing? Or can they be wacky and ridiculous, something that just calls attention to yourself? And what point does customization go from making you stand apart from everyone else to suddenly being a part of a sea of, well, this is just another person, so I shouldn't look at it? At what point do customization options just become background noise, something you don't really notice anymore? And for some people, it's always background noise. It's never important. To some people, only the stats and the numbers. But ultimately, games have taught us that people will pay big bucks for customization options. That goes without saying. I mean, cosmetic items are the entire reason why Team Fortress 2 still exists as a game right now. I hopped into Team Fortress 2 back when it was in its beta phase before it was released. Now, having played it, it's a completely different game. The core maps are the same, but ultimately, the way the game is played with the new weapons that have been added and things like that, all these unlock systems. And a good chunk of the unlock systems are hats and appearance items. And most of these, as they call them, skins, appear through crates and other drops that people sell on the marketplace. The game has formed its own economy entirely around changing the way your character looks. because you can have a certain type of weapon, but if you don't have the golden or Australian version of that particular weapon, then it's not ideal, because you want that status symbol, you want a special named version of that item, you want your character to be decked out in a certain set and look a certain way. And that's where we're getting to, is the customization options. The concept that despite the fact this game is now free and anyone can hop onto it, people will shell out money in order to make their character look and play the way they want. Now let's contrast that with Overwatch, where the game is a buy-in, just like Team Fortress 2 used to be, but there are definitely cosmetic upgrades to be had. And you can buy chests, which are gambling. And for those of you who don't know my personal opinion on gambling, be it cosmetics or not, do check out a video in the video description. It's gambling in video games. By the way, I think it's fucking scum. Now, other than that, how do you tell the difference between a diva who is a bee versus a diva who is regular skinned versus one that has the chrome skin? It's just a little bit of color, but you can obviously tell just by looking at that diva that that's diva. And how much of that skin actually registers with the other people that you're dealing with? Or is it just something that matters to you as the player? How many times have you complimented someone else on that skin, or have you seen that skin way too much? This is where I'm getting to. It's background noise at this point. We go to Diablo 3, where you can customize every aspect of your character and put on any form of clothing and transmogrify it into a different form of clothing. But guess what? The character models are so tiny that you're never really going to have the opportunity to look at the other players and go, oh, this is what they look like. Because you're playing the game, it's so fast-paced, there's so many monsters dying, so many explosions, so much going on, that ultimately you look at these other characters as more or less points on a mini-map. You don't even see them for who they are. Maybe you can make out their character class, kind of like, again, Diva from Overwatch versus a different Diva, like, oh, it's slightly a different color. It doesn't register with us personally. It's a fashion statement that we make about ourselves. It's a form of self-expression. But ultimately, that expression isn't received by other people, not nearly in the same way that we try to send out that expression. So ultimately, the self-expression of character creation is self-serving. We do it because we enjoy looking at the character, and whether we know it or not, other people probably don't give a crap. Now, my point with all this is fairly simple. It's that if we're going to spend time and money customizing a character the way we look, we need to make sure that it's for the right reasons, not because we think someone else is going to notice it. See, I personally have never been entirely against microtransactions in the concept where it's pay to skip, because I am perfectly willing to pay to skip if it gets me to the part of the game that I enjoy most. As I've said 1,000 times, quality time enjoyed versus money spent. And a lot of people will go, you dropped money on a free-to-play game? And yeah, because if the game weren't free-to-play, I would have dropped money on it anyway. In the game Elder Scrolls Online, I picked out a dress for my Dunmer Dragon Knight. So, despite the fact she's a Dragon Knight throwing around Dragon Knight abilities and wearing heavy armor underneath, she's actually wearing a dress over her main set. It's called a costume, and it works in combat. But that is their version of the transmogrification in WoW. Except with the costumes, you have to pay crowns or real-life money, basically, for it. Now, I don't care that much because when it comes down to making my character look the way I want, it's a personal thing. I like the idea of this woman in a dress throwing around these huge spears of fire, which is what the Dragon Knight does. He throws out a spear with a chain attached, pulls the enemy in. But let me ask you a simple question. Is it in the theme of the Elder Scrolls? And I would argue no. No, it's not. I would say that the Crown Store and pretty much everything in Elder Scrolls Online breaks existing Elder Scrolls lore. I've never been shy about flat out saying that ESO can be thought of as, you know, the Star Wars extended universe, the EU, in the way it's not really canon to the films. It never has been canon to the films. It's always been its own kind of floating sphere. Well, in the same vein, Elder Scrolls Online, it contradicts the main series in so many ways that I can't consider it seriously a part of the main franchise. But considering it wasn't made by Bethesda, it was made by ZeniMax Online Studios with an official license, kind of like the way Fallout New Vegas was made with an official license by former Black Isle employees working for Obsidian. Despite the fact it has that official license, Bethesda doesn't take it seriously. Bethesda never took the innovations from Fallout New Vegas seriously, and we know that because of how Fallout 4 turned out. So in not taking ESO seriously, I'm able to enjoy putting on these random costumes and customizing the characters the way I'd want them to look, personally. And it has nothing to do with realism, and everything to do with a choice of aesthetics. Every once in a while, I'll do a incredibly not lore-friendly character in Skyrim, and you can see that with my latest Sonia Belmont build for Castlevania, for instance. Whilst the aesthetics are pleasing to my eyes, they break the lore completely, because there's no way that someone dressed like that would be wielding the weapon that she's wielding and doing the things that she's doing. Definitely not in Skyrim. Japanese websites have concocted thousands of such armors, and they are all very interesting and fun to play with, but ultimately it requires that suspension of disbelief that comes in when you're playing a fantasy game. And when you actually know the lore of the game and how pieces fit together in that world, that suspension of disbelief is more easily broken when a game does not follow its own rules or the rules set down by former entries in the franchise. And that's where a lot of the Elder Scrolls has been biting at me, is the idea that they set down rules in the beginning and then they violate their own rules because Bethesda changes their design direction. And members of the lore community continually ask me, what lore implications does that have? And the answer is that there are no lore implications to it whatsoever. The lore is not a cohesive thing. It is merely a byproduct of these small stories that Bethesda is creating. And we are piecing it together the best we can, but ultimately the conclusions some people come to in order to piece these things together show they don't understand Bethesda's design directions for each game, and how sometimes a game mechanic is just a game mechanic and has no story implications whatsoever. And so, in the same sense, in Elder Scrolls Online, customizing my character to wear a dress and throw molten spears has no lore implications whatsoever. Dressing up a character as Sonia Belmont and having her use the combat cross to annihilate vampires has no lore implications. Just like in World of Warcraft, despite the fact that the Scarlet Crusade was supposed to have been wiped out during the whole Crimson Dawn in Northrend, bam! My wife and I playing Scarlet characters, because we have fond memories of running Scarlet Monastery and just having fun with it. Character customization in an MMORPG is very important. Character customization in an open world RPG is very important in order to express your character. In a single player game, it's more about creating this narrative and telling your story your way. But in an MMORPG, you're trying to show your characters off to other people. You're trying to tell a story with others. And sometimes that's just for the lulz, and other times it's serious business, such as in the case of a role-playing guild on a role-playing server. And so what it comes down to, and I want you all to think about this, is why are you customizing the character the way you are? Are you going to spend 30 minutes crafting that face and only to throw a helmet on it? Or are you going to install a mod that allows you to hide that helmet, and that way you still get the stat bonuses of the helmet, and you're able to show off your character? Who are you showing that off to? Are you showing it off to just yourself every time you take a screenshot for memories? Or are you going to actually show that off to other people and do a little story with your character, maybe a fan fiction or something? Ultimately, if you're going to spend time and resources customize your character, think about why you're doing it. It will help you to better customize the character toward your goal. If you don't have a goal and you're just picking willy-nilly, then keep on doing what you're doing. That's a-okay. Remember, the goal of playing games is always to have fun. But we can always have a little more fun than we did last time, can't we? This has been Zarek Sahakaran. Thanks for listening to my pointless ramble. Check the social media links for more content, and y'all have a good one now.